So, question for you. So, investment opportunity. Don't worry about, you have the resources. All I got $10,000 in your bank, right? Got $10,000 in your bank, it's in there right now. But with that $10,000 in your bank that belongs to you, right? I'm gonna give you a couple of investment opportunities. First investment opportunity, $10,000. I have this bank. It's a FDIC bank, so it's federally insured, right? I'm gonna ask you, do you want to invest your $10,000 that you have earned, put it in my FDIC bank, with the understanding that in 6 months you're gonna get $100. You're gonna give me $10,000, but in 6 months you're gonna get your $10,000 plus $100. Any takers? $10,000 you got in your bank, you earn is yours. I have an investment opportunity. I have a bank, it's an FDIC. It's not my bank. It's a real bank. And in 6 months, you're gonna give it up to you're gonna put your $10,000 into this account. In 6 months, you're gonna have your $10,000 plus an additional $100. Would you be willing to risk? Would you be willing to put the $10,000 there? Keep in mind the bank is FDIC, so you won't lose the money unless something really goes wrong with our government, right? But other than that, you're gonna get your money plus the $100. Any takers?
Why not?
Takers?
Yeah.
A better offer, I'll take that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Well, this is
right.
what a better offer is. Okay.
That's right.
So that's only for 6 months, if you leave it there for 1 year, that's $200 more, right?
Well, 6 months. That's it. You're gonna take it. We're done.
We're
I don't
done.
want to see you no more. I'm just kidding. No, it's 6 months. So here's the other offer. I heard another offer. $10,000. There's another investment. You're gonna have the potential of different returns. Out of these different returns, 2 of them is one will be double that $10,000. The other one will be the loss of all your $10,000. Who would take this offer over the first offer?
Not a risk taker.
I don't like that law.
Who would take the second? Anybody else?
Do I get the double?
Huh?
Do I get that double?
You get the double. With the second one, you either get to take the 10,000. You could double it. That's one. Another option is you could get 0. There's other options, but those are 2 options.
The second.
You want the second one? Okay, so let's see what we have here. Nobody's was either one or the other, right? And you'll take the second. You take the second one. No questions asked. All right. So by definition, so we're going to be talking about. So we're in biblical finance. We're going to be talking about staying out of debt. We are in week 3. We're discussing chapter 3 and chapter 4. And before we go into the actual information that's in the book, I like to bring additional information and other practical stuff, right? So I wanted to talk a little about risk, and that right there, what I just shared with me, gave me a couple of definitions. You kind of displayed a couple of definitions for some of these different levels of risk, right? So we had the risk. So there's one class that they consider like a risk adverse. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a person who doesn't want to deal, doesn't want to take risk, right? They're afraid of the outcomes that may not go that way, right? But we also know that it's important to take risks if we want to get some rewards, right? Pastor talked about that a few weeks, right? There's on the opposite spectrum, so I'm skipping the middle one, going to the second one, there's the opposite one, risk seekers, right? These are the ones, definition, they say that these describe a person who is inclined or eager to take risks. All right, so we had 2, some of us didn't want to take that second option, right? Between the first and second, some of us didn't want to take the second. They wanted that risk averse. Some of us, we had 2 that said, I'll take that risk, right? Risk seekers, right? No questions asked. And then I didn't get anybody to say, well, give me some like ask any questions or anything like that, other than what are the probabilities that's there, all right? So we talked about the first, we have the adverse, talk about risk seeker. There's another one they talk about is risk neutral. I'm gonna share with you the definition of what the theory is, and I'll be transparent. I'm not 100%, if I can find my mouse, there it is. I'm not 100% in agreement with the definition for the risk neutral, but I'm gonna share it with you. So risk neutral, it describes a person that is simply not interested in risk at all, right? So they don't care about the risk. Not that they don't care if there's risk, is they're not moved by risk, right? It does not enter their radar. He or she is indifferent, regardless of whether it is high or whether it's low. So they said they are motivated by the calculated benefits, all right? So that's where I have a little difficulties with the risk neutral. Because when they said they are motivated by the calculated benefits, to me, I'm a finance person, and maybe just because I'm a finance person, we think of calculated benefits in that equation. We talk about rate of return. Expected return. Automatically, there's a formula that includes risk. There's beta that's in there, which is risk. So to me, even if they're not thinking about it, they're doing some type of calculation. Inherently, they're considering risk, right? So my theory, again, I'm not writing a book. If you want to use this information, write a book, go ahead. If you want to send me some proceeds, if you make money, that's fine, you don't need to. But I will say that we have people that are risk averse, we have people that are risk seekers, but we have people that are in between. And in between basically means that we may take into consideration what other opportunities are. Like for example, I just say that you have one woods for the 100,000, for the 10,000. I just say you have a probability of, I said probability, but one outcome could be double your money. One outcome could be loss of all your money. There's other outcomes as well. Those outcomes could be just getting your money back, making a little bit of making some more money, making maybe 1.5 times your money, maybe losing some of that. But there's different outcomes, and based on those outcomes, you may want to say, what's the probabilities of those different outcomes? What's the likelihood of my doubling money will be double? It may be only like 5%. What's the probability of me losing my money? It may be like 30-40%. That may shift some of us. A risk seeker, a true risk seeker, is not going to shift their thought. So I got a 5% chance to double my money, 95% of losing all. The risk seeker was, according to that, will go for it, right? Adverse person definitely ain't touching that, right? But other people will say, well, depending on the probability and the risk, depending on the probability of different outcomes, I may consider it. Other that may influence is, I said I had 10,000 in the bank. Some of y'all have more than 10,000. Some of y'all got like $1 million in the bank. Now investing 10,000, does that carry the same risk? If you have $1 million in the bank as a person, that's the only 10,000 they have? No. Would they carry the same risk if they have 10,000 in the bank, but that 10,000 isn't theirs? It belongs to someone else. It belongs to the mortgage payment. So those different levels of those different things we'll consider what I would think would affect what that person's decision is. So I won't say they're not risk neutral. Well, I'll say they maybe risk neutral, but not like they're not considering risk. They are evaluating, right? Evaluating what their risks are. All right. So, and I know a couple of weeks ago, Pastor Johnny did talk about risk, right? And we're taking this, and when we talk about risk, I'm not saying stuff like this to try to scare you from taking risk, but just for you to be aware of the risks that's out there and learning how to manage those risks, right? And not just for investment, but we're controlling our financing, and we can use this for stuff other than that, right? Everyday life. right? Business people, when I talked on the first week, I said that we're all CEOs, CFOs, COOs of our household. Same way when we manage our homes and different things, we need to consider risk and how that would impact it. Now, when we wear that CFO hat, we have to see how the different risk areas affect our financing, right? So I wanted to remind us when we talk about the need of taking risks and versus not taking risks, right? So I remember the parable of the talents, or in the King James talk about talents, and it's in Matthew 25:14-30, right? And I put 39, but I think it's 30. That's probably 39. And it talks about the master who gives a different amount of talents. And if you look at the NIV, they talk about bags of gold to different servants and what they did with it, right? If we consider Luke 14:20-32, it teaches us that we need to plan, right, ahead, plan ahead and estimate costs and assess alternatives, right? So we do know the Bible talks about risk and taking risk. I know as some of us, we shouldn't be too much risk averse. We shouldn't be completely risk averse, but we have to take risks, right? But I don't think it's time to go out there and, just jump without calculating some things, right? All right. So let's talk about risk management. So when we talk about risk management, there are 5 things we want to consider when we talk about risk management. The first thing that we need to do when we're talking about risk is let's identify the risk. What is the risk? So what is the potential problem or loss that can occur? That would be like the risk. So some examples will be like, we talk about our household, and we're managing a household. If I'm the breadwinner, right? If I lose my job, that could be a risk on our entire family, right? Other things could be unexpected maintenance, right? If my bank account, if I live paycheck to paycheck, and something come unexpectedly, that could be a risk to my family, right? Illness will happen. Again, either breadwinner, or even if I wasn't a breadwinner, the expenses of taking care of it, right? The loss of earnings while I am recovering, right? Those are different risks that we need to consider and deal with, right? Death, right? Death could be, especially breadwinner of a household, even if you're not the sole breadwinner, but that income is essential part of taking care of the household. If something was to happen to that part of that income, what would happen to the rest of the family, the other spouse and children and kids, right? If they rely on that, all right? So those are different types of risks. So what do we do once we see what risks are? We will analyze the risk, all right? So analyze the risk. What I mean by that is simply understanding the scope of the risk. What will be the impact, right? Would it be significant? Would it be like hardly noticeable, right? Or would it be something moderate, right? And then we'll evaluate the risk. So what we analyze, the next one we're gonna evaluate. When I think about evaluating the risk, I'm thinking about seeing what the probability of how something would occur, all right? Is it likely that it's gonna happen? Is it unlikely or very likely it's gonna happen, right? So that's what we want to, when we looking at risk, what we're considering, right? And I can imagine that depending on how we feel the impact of the risk and the probability of the risk, we may want to adjust how we manage that risk, right? We will take different actions accordingly, right? But also another part of, before we look at evaluating the risk, we want to look at treating the risk, and that's treating the risk there. Determine the steps that we will use to either, so if I look at something and I see that something is high risk, right, it's very probable, I may want to look at what are controls that I could put in place that will reduce that high risk, high probable risk of occurring. All right? What can I put in place? What I want to do is I want to either eliminate the risk, or I want to reduce the risk or the severity of that risk. I want to put things in control. In our household, we're doing the same thing. And we talked about risk. One of the risks we mentioned before was like death, right? Death can happen, illness, right? If I'm if I'm like a contributing factor of my household, being able to take care of my finances, something was to happen to me, and I didn't have a lot of savings left, what will happen to my family? They don't struggle. What can I do? So that's a risk, and that could be I would consider to be very significant, right? Probability of me dying, I think we all gonna die unless Jesus tarry. Would it be tomorrow? Would it be the next 5 years? I don't know, but I know it's not promised, right? But if something happens in that time, my family has some things that they have to really think about, right? So what can I do? What's something I can do to mitigate that risk?
You prepare your plan, savings.
Save? Well, a lot of people take something, because it takes a while to save for that, right? But that's something I want to do, right? But in the meantime, okay. Meantime, I may want to take a life insurance policy, right? So if something happens to me, they could be taken care of, right? And then why I have that life insurance? Because usually and I'm not talking about all the various types. I'm just talking about like a term life policy for right now. If I took a term life policy, it's going to be over at a certain term. So by the time that term's over, I like to be in a position that I have financial security. So if something's to happen, my family be taken care of, right? So then at that point, I won't need life insurance, right? So right now, where I'm at in my family, we need life insurance. Don't need life insurance.
And then the emergency fund, right, for something, that's another way of doing it.
Yeah, so other risks that we talked about, as well as losing a job and different things like losing your job, something comes up and for like maintenance, right? If I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and some of us may be there right now, and again, if that's your starting point, that's fine. We know where your starting point is. We know where our vision is, because we wrote that down, right? But we're gonna show you ways of how you go from one point and how you go from using your net income to create wealth. And as you create wealth, we'll show you how to have an emergency fund. So when those things occur that's unexpected come up, you have resources for it, right? So that's a way of mitigating those risks, right? And same thing with illnesses. Those doctor bills could be expensive. Maybe not life insurance, but maybe some type of insurance policy.
I was gonna say about life insurance, I know in some cultures, it's like, some people may think, hey, I don't need it, they'll just throw me in a hole or whatever. They don't think about the consequences.
And the wife will just marry somebody else.
Yeah.
Or if they know I got it, they may just kill me to get it.
Yeah, so
Like he's worth more dead than alive.
I think when it comes to insurance, it's important to take all the liabilities in consideration. Like, if you're young and you still have another 40 years before retiring, then you gotta look at what's the liability by that time. But for right now, something were to happen, let's say you owe 200,000 or 300, well then you gotta take a policy that's around that amount or more to cover your family in case something happens immediately.
Yeah, we'll have a class where we talk about specific how to, the best ways of getting. We will get there, but this is a great point. Thank you for
So that's good. So not only are we thinking about the life insurance, but then you're thinking about what to get, which is an important thing as a CFO of your family that you need to consider. Which, like Sarai said, we're going to go into a little bit more. All right. So we talked about so this is right here, managing your risk. When we talk about analyzing, you have impact. What different impacts it's gonna have is going up and down, and you have likelihood going across. And if something is low, as far as likelihood probability is low, and the impact is low, we may say, I'm just gonna accept the risk. It probably will never happen. If it does, it's gonna be minor. I'm not gonna waste my time over it. And there's different things in between, but if we look at something that's highly likely or highly probable and it is significant, we're gonna need to really make some plans and thoughts and consideration when we talk about the life insurance plan, right? That may be something like, significant emergency funds, different things like that. Again, this just doesn't work for here. This is something I learned in military that they use it for their operations, right? We're gonna use it for different levels and areas for our household, all right? So it's the same tool to be used for all over areas of life. All right, so what time is it? So yesterday, I was actually doing some yard work in my house. I was looking at my neighbors' houses and I was seeing how nice and stuff they look. Saw all the pools and everything like that. And I was looking at mine and I was saying, wow, got a lot of weed. The grass isn't growing, but the weed is growing. Right? So I was thinking about mowing it. So I said, no, I'm just gonna pull the weed out. Right? Pull the weed out. She's like, ooh, that's not working. I have a corner lot, so it's like pretty big. So I go out there and pull the weeds up. Because I know I have a big line, it's a lot of work, I go out there with a little vigor. I go out there and try to stop just trying to pull stuff. And I just try to really pull it real quick. Realizing that as I was pulling it, I was working hard, working fast, but I was working slow because I was missing something. I wasn't getting the root. And I noticed when I slowed down, I started pulling the root. Not only I was getting that part, I was getting everything that was attached to it. So I was able to pull up a little more at the same time, right? But also know as I pull up the root, if I take away that problem, it's not going to grow back as quickly, right? If I just go out and start pulling and the root is still there, the problem hasn't gone anywhere, right? The symptom is gone, but the problem isn't there, right? So when we talk about when I'm thinking about finding our debt, and especially in an American society, we do have a root problem why we have a lot of debt, right? And the reason why we are in a lot of debt is because, and here we're always, a lot of us, and I'm not talking about each and every one, but in general, Americans are always looking at the Joneses, all right? I want what they have, right?
Most people.
And even if it's not what they have, I see something I want and I want it now, right? I'm gonna get it now. And our society, they make it easy for us to get things that we like and get it now, right? Just take out a loan, pay for it later. Take out a loan, pay for it later. Problem when we take out a loan, pay for it later, our money isn't ours, our earnings isn't ours anymore. Our earnings belong to the thing we gotta pay later, right? So, in order for us to first look at handling or contacting or combating our debt is not to go out there and just start spending less, that's gonna be good, but go a little deeper. Look inside, what are we doing that's behavior that we need to change? Being satisfied with what God gave us. Realizing that His time is good, right? Realizing if we don't have it, probably we don't need to have it. We don't need to hate on another person. Be grateful, be glad that they have it.
That's right.
Rejoice for them, but be content with what you have. And realize that just because this is where you're at right now, there is a blessing coming for you, but it's coming in due time.
Amen.
Right? I just thought about, well, why we have a whole bunch of rumors of war right now, because someone wasn't patient on their blessing. God gave a blessing to Abraham and said, I'm going to bless you. And they couldn't wait for that blessing. So they did something completely different. And now we have a whole bunch of wars. I'm going to digress, get back into here. But yeah, we want to consider knowing first take care of our mental and also taking care of the core problems. A lot of us in America now, we can't imagine having a car loan without a car payment, right? We have to buy a car, we have to have a car payment. And a lot of us, even before we pay off the car, we have a new car because something else just came out that's newer and better. or my neighbor got it, so we're trading it in before we pay it off. So we always have a car payment. A lot of us can't can't imagine living without a mortgage, right? We can. That's a debt that, especially now, we're gonna see that we're gonna get, but we could pay that off, right? That's not something that needs to be long term. We can't imagine a student without a loan, all right? People think if you go to school, you're gonna have a student have a student loan. Those are not where we should be at. So, I know a few weeks ago I mentioned about I mentioned the equation as far as a balance sheet, what a balance sheet is. I talked about an asset was equal to your liability plus equity. And I said, I think this is why some people think when they look at liability as being an asset, I think this is why people think sometimes liability debt may be good because they use that liability debt to help finance things, to get things for them, right? And sometimes they use that as a form of leverage. So we talked about investing earlier, right? So sometimes people want to increase their rate of return, right? Which is if I invest this amount of money, right? And if I can make more, and what I get back on top of that, that's my rate of return, right? So some people, what they'll do, if I have $1,000 to invest, some people, like if I have $1,000 to invest, and there's an investment where I can make $200, right? So I make $1,200. I have a 20% rate of return. Somebody might be slick, say, you know what? I got $1,000, and I'm gonna leverage that. I'm gonna leverage some debt. And I'm gonna invest $2,000 so I can make $400. They increase their rate of return, right? The only problem with that is that as an investment is a risk, right? That means they also have opportunity loss. They can also lose $200. And they can also double that by taking on debt. Instead of losing $200, they can lose $400, right? So there's other things they can do. And usually when people talk about leveraging and investing and selling that part, the no risk, no rewards, which is good, they forget to tell you sometimes risk comes with losses, right? That's why you get an increase with it, because you've taken on the possibility of being able to lose money. But they don't sell that part. And I'm not saying this to scare you from it, but we need to be aware of those are things that can happen. All right. So the book talks about. I don't think the book talks about leveraging, but the book has a lot of different myth. Well, talks about different myth. Doesn't have myth. That talks about a lot of different myths that I want y'all to read. Again, Soraya was talking about read the book, because we can't go over everything in the book, but they talk about different myths. And one of the myths they talk about is lending money, right? So I would advise, right, not to lend money, right? And when I say not, yeah, I went up. When I advise not to lend money, when you lend money to someone and you need that money, right? You can't give that money out, because if that person doesn't pay you back, especially if it's a friend or a relative, that person doesn't pay you back and you needed that money, what are you gonna do? You're gonna hound that person, right? That person that you love is the person you upset. Now you call them, hounded them. You created strife in the relationship. It would have been better for them to say, no, I can't afford, I don't have it to give it to you. They'd have been disappointed for a minute. They would have get over it, right? But when you lend money and they can't pay you back for years, y'all, I lent you that money, you say it's gonna pay you back, you never did. I had to pay my mortgage. You're gonna have issues with that, right? Leading on to co-signing, same thought pattern. And I know when I say this, even lending money, as Christians, we always want to help, right? So that's a hard thing to say no when you know you want to give, you want to help. I think a lot of us here, when we talk about retiring with being wealthy, it's not because we want to keep it for ourselves, because we want to share it. I think even right now, when we are get to that point, we want to share it. But sometimes you need to, protect, right? Same thing with co-signing. You cannot co-sign for someone unless you're willing to make that payment when they don't make the payment.
Exactly.
If you think about banks wants to lend money. So when they tell someone I'm not lending you money, there's a reason that they saw, right? They either didn't see a history of that person, a good history of that person paying back, because maybe they're too young to have that history, so they haven't proven themselves, or they have proven themselves not to be trustworthy. And then I don't need a cosigner. So they already know the chance probability that's slamming. So when you go and cosign for, know that you're doing it because someone haven't proven himself yet, or proven himself not to be trustworthy. So you're gonna be making those payments. And if you can't afford to make the payments, don't do it.
That's right.
Don't do it. They'll get over it,
Yeah.
right? They're gonna have to get over it.
Right.
Credit cards. Okay, so I'm not gonna say credit cards are bad. I'm definitely not gonna say they're good, right? Everything has a purpose. Read the book. The book's gonna tell you get rid of all credit cards. And I'm not saying that mentality is wrong. For the majority of us, that's the right mentality. Because for the majority of us, if we get that utility, that use, we're gonna use it in the wrong way. We may have started with good motives, but it's gonna end up using the wrong way, right? So one of the things the credit cards try to do to lure us, besides us wanting things right now, right, is that I'm gonna give you some points when you rewards. I'm gonna reward you for using this credit card. So I'm gonna reward you. Now think about it again. The bank is there to make profit. They're a for-profit organization. They ain't there to reward you for nothing, right? That's not their end goal. Now, will they give you that? Yes, but they want something in return. One thing they realize is that as Americans, right, that the average American has a credit card balance of $6,000. So even though they went into the mindset, I'm gonna buy something, I'm gonna pay it off at the end of the month and I get paid. But when we buy credit cards, we're not looking at what we buy more than we can't afford, so we're not having balances. Average American has $6,000 of a balance. If they give you a 1 or 2% reward, how much is that? Like $60, $120 reward.
That's it.
Now, what are they getting back in interest? The interest rates right now is over 20%. So if it's over 20% and you have a balance of $6,000, you're giving the bank $1,200. I don't see the fair trade in that. All right. So when they're giving you a reward, believe me, it's coming at a price. That's coming at your expense, right? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, but when you're using the credit cards to your advantage because you're paying off your balances, then those point cards do.
No, yeah, they're good.
Right.
Now, like I said, I won't say they're bad, but I'm saying the majority of people won't use that
They have
way.
a balance.
Yeah, and the majority of us will go in that concept of doing that.
And they get
But
that.
I would promise you, if you ask a lot of us who went in that thought process, because I've done it, I'm gonna pay it off. There's been times where, oh, I can't pay it off. Now I got a balance, right? And it starts growing. So I got the reward, and I got the, but there's a lot of people who uses it. They use it correctly, right? And I won't say correctly. They use it to their advantage, and the banks are losing on them.
Yeah.
But the thing is that when you look at the majority of Americans, they're gonna give up some loss for a bigger gain. They know the probability is that I'm gonna get more people that's gonna have more balance than I'm gonna give rewards. And that's what they're going after. And that's why I think when the author of the book, he's gonna say no, 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 no. I understand like you that there's a good thing to it, but he's gonna tell everybody to get rid of it because he knows when he's speaking to the person who is not gonna, who's gonna suffer, who's gonna have the loss. So that's what he's protecting. All right, so there's a lot of get rich quick schemes out there. So the books also talk about money myth, right? So there's a lot of schemes about get rich quick, right? And I would say that usually when I hear those, I get scared when they start saying it. So usually when people talk about some type of get rich quick scheme, usually it's false. Like if they say you're gonna be able to work 3 hours a day, make $100,000 a year, majority of that is gonna be false. I'm afraid to say, I'm always never gonna say everything is absolute. That's just me. But if I was to ever say something's absolute, that would be the thing I would say something's absolute. They're gonna be false, right? So how do most of us make money? And it's not becoming an athlete or having a job that pays you a lot of money. Because believe it or not, people who make a lot of money, sometimes they're in the same situation as us who don't make a lot of money. They spend a lot of money, they spend more than they could afford to spend, and they're in debt as well, right? So what is the true way of making money over time? Is leveraging your net income. Your net income is what you have left over when you did your spending plan. You figure out, this is my income, this is my expenses, this is my net income, this is what I have left over. When you learn to manage that properly, that's gonna be your wealth. For some of us, that may be right now, I'm gonna save my emergency fund, my first emergency fund, then I'm gonna pay off debt, and then I'm gonna complete my bigger emergency fund, which we're gonna talk about later, and then I'm gonna start saving money. And then I'm gonna start saving more money, then I'm gonna pay off my house. But you start off with that net income is gonna grow, right? Not because besides your income growing, just because you're not paying everybody else money. So because you don't have a lot of expense, I have a lot more residual income. And when I have more residual income, I could do a lot more, and I could do more and let that grow. So that's where our wealth is gonna grow. Now, how do we get to that point? The book's gonna talk about a concept talking about live like no one else. Right? So in the initial one, so I live like no one else. He's talking about not living like the Joneses, like we talked about. Get rid of that mentality, right? Live like no one else. Live below your means. Live at your means. Live below your means, right? If you do that long enough, you're gonna be at a point where you're gonna be able to live like no one else. And I'm not talking about living. I'm talking about living. Because you have a lot of savings, because you have a lot of investments, you'd be able to do more things that you wasn't able to do in the past. You'd be able to give more like we want to give. You could lend to your family member, but knowing that there's a gift, they give it back, But that's how you're gonna look at it, but you'd be able to do things like that, right?
Yeah.
Any questions? I'm on that over time. Any questions? Any additions?
No.
Yes, sir.
I know we're at time real quick, but that was important. You were talking about risk. Can you, I know we'll touch on it at a different module, but can you also touch real quick on the risk of how you evaluate the risk of your employment as far as the vulnerability is concerned?
Oh, okay. So risk of employment, if I think I understand your question, is when you talking about we're gonna start saving for that.
Applies to the.
Okay, so some of us, we have employment, we're gonna go into it, but this is a good segment to think about it. Some of us that are at jobs and we have certain amount of income, right? And if we was to lose that job, we need to, how quickly, based on our employment, based on our career in that industry, how quickly are we able to get that same type of job? Some careers, like a teacher right now, teachers are high in demand, right? If I was a teacher and I lost my job, I don't know why they would do it, but if they lost their job as a teacher, they'd probably be employed in a month, right? You may have a job where, because your job career industry is competitive, you may lose your job and it may take you a year to get your job back, all right? So I think that's what you wanted to talk about. Yeah, some jobs may take 4 or 5 months. So we're gonna take that into consideration in other classes that we talking about. But everything's
Right?
risk.
When you work for commission is another consideration. We love talking later because when we talk about finances again, we give the basis, but it's not the same for everybody. So it's one-on-one access.
I would also suggest that we give Mr. Keane 2 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever, to explain come up here and talk about what you were saying.
What's that?
What you asked him to explain, go explain it to the class.
And
Okay. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Darrell Keene. My wife Giovanna Keene over there. Pleasure to introduce ourselves to everybody. We've been kind of missing in action. We've got a little newborn over there. But we're back with the team. So I just wanted Dan to touch on that real quickly because as it applies towards risk, it's important for you to have that food for thought of all the risky situations or scenarios that he was talking through. But the way that you're providing income for yourself can also be a risk as well, right? So Soraya talked about it, Dan talked about it. The way in which you make money and your ability to sustain that in the event that something happens is also a variable risk that you want to take into account. So when we get to that part of the course, we're going to teach a module on emergency savings. And that's that variable of how risky your employment or your ability to create income for yourself is gonna determine how much emergency savings you actually need to set aside for yourself. So I just wanted to plant that seed because I thought it was good food for thought as we move into that, because he was covering risk in depth, and this is another angle at looking at risk that might not have been on your mind. Does that make sense?
Can you close us in prayer?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan, for leading us today. Great presentation, by the way. All right, Father God, thank you so much for bringing us together today. Thank you for allowing us to worship in your house, and thank you so much for the blessing of today that you've given to us, Lord. Thank you for the freedoms that we have in this country to do so. May we all hear your instruction, hear your words, Lord, hear your direction that you have for us, but also have hearts and minds and ears that are open towards actioning the things that you are giving to us, Lord, the wisdom that you're imparting on us so that we can move forward and become better stewards with our finances to honor you in all that we do, Lord. We thank you for this day. We love you and we praise you. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. I have labels for Yolanda and Maria. Do you want us to use this label for your